guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rochelle, and as you can see in the title below, I'll be talking about how you can actually start building your wealth in Canada. So before we get into this video, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment in the comment section below. So let's get into this video. So disclaimer before I actually start, I am not a financial advisor. I'm not authorized to be giving any financial advice, but I'll just be sharing based off my own personal experience as it relates to how I started to, or how I went about starting to build wealth in Canada. So let's get into the video. So how does one go about start building wealth in Canada? I think one way of starting to build wealth is through investing. And how does one start investing? How do you get into the stock market? So in Canada, the government has put a few investment accounts into place. I will be focusing on three of them because I do have two for myself. One is for my daughter. So I'll be talking about them, how one can actually get into the stock market. So as I mentioned, there's a few accounts that the government has put in place for us to invest and start building wealth. But the main two that I'll be focusing on is the TFSA and the RRSP, because these are tax-free accounts. So if you don't know what is a TFSA is a tax-free savings account. And then you also have the RRSP, which is the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. And I'll touch a little bit on the RESP, which is the Registered Education Savings Plan, because I have that account for my 3-year-old daughter. So how does one go about opening a TFSA and a RRSP account? So first thing first, what you need to be over the age of 18 years old in order to open these accounts. Secondly, you have to have status in Canada. So your status can either be you're on a work permit, you're a permanent resident, or a Canadian citizen. And yes, I mentioned work permit because I did open my TFSA and my RRSP while I was on my work permit. So that's how I know. So first thing first, where do you actually open these accounts? So the options that are available, you can either go through your bank. So you know the top 5 banks in Canada, which is Scotia, TD, RBC, CIBC, BMO, and then also you have the smaller banks such as Tangerine, Neo, ATB, Canadian Western Bank. So yeah, you have like the smaller banks. And also you do have the online brokerage such as Wealthsimple and Questrade. So those are online brokerages that do offer the TFSA and the RRSP as well. So you can open if you don't want to go through a bank. So if you do decide to open a TFSA, let's say, account, as I mentioned, it is the tax-free savings account. So after you decide where you want to open, you can either open with your bank or the online brokerage. If you do decide to go with your bank, let's say you decide to go with your bank, say for example you're with TD. So once you open your account, the option will be that either you go with a self-directing TFSA or you do decide to go with mutual funds. So if you do decide to go with self-directing, it means that you'll have ownership over your account, which you will be responsible for buying your stocks or your ETFs. Versus if you do decide to go with a mutual fund, your bank will be primarily responsible for your account. So your bank will make all the decision as it relates to what they will be invested with your money. So as I mentioned, once you open your account and you do decide on what you want to do, you can either let your bank be responsible, or you can do self-directing where you pick the stocks and ETFs that you want to add to your portfolio. So if you do decide to go with self-directing TFSA, where you are primarily responsible for your account, once you deposit money into your TFSA, please don't let the money sit in the account. The next step is that you have to decide on the stocks and ETFs that you're going to invest in. And also, I think for me, having a TFSA. Okay, so as it relates to having a TFSA, there are a few rules that you need to know about. So when you do open a TFSA account, please make sure that you know how much is your contribution for the year. So if you don't know how much money you're allowed to contribute into your TFSA, log into your MyCRA account, which is a Canadian Revenue Agency. Once you log into your account, it will tell you how much money you're allowed to deposit into your TFSA on each year, which will be tax-free. So for example, if you log into your account and CRA tells you that your contribution limit for your TFSA account is $5,000. That $5,000 that you invest into your tax-free savings account, it will be tax-free. So all the interest gains, dividend that you get that you accumulated over the year, it will be tax-free. If you do decide to invest more than the 5,000, then the government will tax you on the amount. So just make sure that you're mindful about how much you're allowed to contribute into your TFSA. And also another rule of the TFSA is that you can withdraw money and not pay any taxes on that. So I think having the TFSA is a great option for long-term and short-term goals. Short-term, if you're planning a vacation and you want to start saving up some money, I think investing that into the TFSA would be great, because when you do withdraw money, it is tax-free. You will not be taxed. So the next account that I'll be touching base on is the RRSP. So what is a RRSP? The RRSP is the Registered Retired Savings Plan. So I think this account is a great account for you to start planning and saving for your future, because at the end of the day, don't nobody want to be working at 65 years old. Like, I feel like the goal is to retire early. And I think planning for the future, why not? I think this is a great account. I do have it. I've had this account for like 4 years now, and all the money that I've invested, I have not touched. And I think it's a great, and the reason why I think it's a great account, I do understand that I am pretty young. I'm 27 years old, but I need to start planning for my future. I do understand as Canadians, we do pay into CPP, which is the Canadian Pension Plan. So that's, so you start paying into that, and then once you retire, the government starts to give you some money on a monthly basis. But if you're not paying attention to like what's going on in the world right now, like if you live in Canada, you know, like inflation is through the roof, cost of living is through the roof, food is ridiculously high. So I think it's extremely important to start planning for your future. And as I mentioned, the RRSP is pretty much similar requirements to open. It's similar requirements as it relates to what you need to open your TFSA. So you need to have status in Canada. So you can either be a permanent resident, a citizen, or you can be either a Canadian citizen, a work permit holder, or a permanent resident. That's all you need to open, and also be over the age of 18, and you should be working, filing taxes, and you have filed your taxes before. So pretty much those are the requirements to open a RSP. And as mentioned, you can open with your bank or your online brokerage, which is either Wealthsimple or Questrade. And as I mentioned, if you do decide to open a RRSP, you have to figure out what works best for you. You can either do self-directing, where you oversee and choose what you want to diversify your portfolio with, or you can let your bank manages your account for you. So rules of having a TFSA, I think this account is very great for tax benefit reasons. So and what I mean by that, so for example, if your yearly salary is $65,000, if you contribute $5,000 to your say, the government will only tax you on the $60,000. They won't tax you on the $65,000 that you make a year. So if you put 5,000 in, that's tax free, and then they'll only tax you on the 60K. Also, one rule that you need to be aware of with the RRSP, because it's taxable, one of the rule is if you do decide to withdraw from your RRSP, you will be taxed. So it's not like the TFSA where you withdraw money and it's tax free, you're not taxed. With the RRSP, if you do pull money out, you will be taxed. And also, similar to the TFSA, please make sure that you're aware of your contribution limit for the year, because if you do go over your contribution limit, you will be taxed on that. So the next account that I'll be touching base on that I do think every parent should have for their kids is the RESP. So what is the RESP? The RESP is the Registered Education Savings Plan. For me, I do have this account for my daughter. My daughter is 3 years old, and I actually opened this account for her when she was 3 months old. And all you need to open an RESP is your kid has to be either Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, their social insurance number, and who's going to be funding this account. That's all you need. I made an appointment with my bank and I went in. For me personally, with my bank, requirement to open an RESP, you needed a minimum of $500 to open. I don't know if it has changed, but this was like in... My daughter was 3 months, so I think in January 2020, I opened her RESP. So at the time, my bank said minimum $500. I do have her RESP in a mutual fund. I do know that with mutual funds, you don't have control over your account. And to be honest, it works for me. It's not like it's money that I'm going to touch or anything. It's for my daughter's future. It's there, so when she gets to 18 and she's ready to go to school, there is money there. And also, I don't know if there's a yearly contribution limit on the RESP compared to like having your TFSA and your RRSP. I'm not sure. I think I'm gonna have to read up on that, but I do know that if you invest 2,500 per year, the government will add 20% to that. And I think that's extremely great. I think as parents, it's extremely important for us to not just plan for our future, but also plan for your kids as well, because you don't want your kids starting life off in debt. So yeah, so for anyone out there that is thinking about getting into investing, starting out, you don't know where to start, I would say do as much research as possible. Try to find out what the options are available in your country. I do know each country is different. I'm just talking based off my own personal experience and talking from a person who resides in Canada, the options that are available. And I think also, because I was mentioning online brokerage, if you don't want to go through your bank, as I was mentioning earlier, you can go through online brokerages such as Questrade and Wealthsimple. I personally use Wealthsimple. Questrade, I don't really know much about, but I do know that they offer more as it relates to what Wealthsimple offers. I think Wealthsimple is a little bit newer compared to Questrade. So Questrade definitely offers more, but with Wealthsimple, I find it extremely user friendly. I do have my TFSA with them, and some of the features that they do offer, I like. So like, for example, they do offer fractional sharing. And what is fractional sharing? So fractional sharing is, for example, you want to buy a particular stock. Let's say you want to buy you want to buy a particular stock, but you don't have enough money. You can buy a fraction of that. For me, when I started off, I didn't really know much as it relates to getting into the stock market. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading. And for me personally, I started off with ETFs and low index funds. And the reason why I started off with ETFs is because of the quarterly dividend. And whenever I would get my dividend, I would reinvest it back into the stock market instead of taking it and go spending it. I just reinvest it. So I think when you're starting out, ETFs are really great. For me, I do have a diversified portfolio right now. I don't only own ETFs. I do have a few stocks, and some stocks do offer dividend as well. I do know that TD is a great stock to have in your portfolio. I do know that TD, BMO, Scotia, RBC, the banks. For me, I like to stick to the banks. So they do have they do dividends as well, and dividends are paid out quarterly, which is every 3 months. And for me, also in my portfolio, I don't really, for me personally, I only own two American stocks, which is Tesla and Apple. I try to stay away from American stocks. I think maybe in the future I will dive into that, but for now I think I'll just stick to those two. And the reason why I kind of stay away from American stocks is that if I do decide to sell them, then I have to pay commission. But in my portfolio, pretty much everything is Canadian based. There's a lot of good options here in Canada as well. So I think I'm gonna close the video out here. As I mentioned, this is based off my own personal experience, how I got into start building wealth in Canada. And for me, I think it's extremely important as immigrants to have your finances together. For me, I moved here as a student, and I have to make sure that I have my finances together. It's really being on your own. You don't want to ever be in a situation where you're not able to help yourself. And for me, the advice I would offer to anyone out there who wants to get into the stock market, depending on where you are, please find out the options that are available in your country. Please make sure that you do your research. I feel like having your finances together is extremely important, especially when you're trying to build generational wealth. You have kids and you want to make sure that you leave something behind for them when you leave this world. So I think it's extremely important just to make sure that you have your finances together. And I think one way of having your finances together is through investing and learning about how money works and how money grows. For me, I think one thing about me, like I really like how I'm disciplined as it relates to how I deal with my finances. And that's one thing that as a child, I think that's one characteristic that I took from my mom. Growing up, I remember my mom would always say to me and my siblings, please make sure that you save money. Please make sure that you put down something for Mr. Rainy Day, because it doesn't make sense. You're working and you're not saving and you're not putting down anything aside. That doesn't really make sense. And I think that's one thing that I take from my mom, and that's one thing that I really admire her. I really admire how she saves. And that's one thing that I took away from my mom, and that's one thing that I will definitely pass on to my daughter. Please make sure that you save. Make sure that you have money set aside. Even for me, although I do invest in the stock market, please make sure that you have a emergency fund as well. You have money set aside for Mr. Rainy Day. So you know you have a savings account, you're like, you know what, I'll put that aside, and that's for Mr. Rainy Day in case anything happen. Because one thing, if you don't know about the stock, what you don't know about the stock market, so once you invest your money into the stock market by buying stocks and ETFs, if you do decide to sell, the funds are not available right away. It's not. So if you, let's say for example, you have an emergency and you need funds right away, even if you sell your stocks, it's not available right away. So I think one thing about getting your finances together, please have an emergency fund, please have Mr. Rainy Day money put aside. And yeah, and also please make sure that you do think about having some form of investment for your kids as well. I'm heavy on this, making sure that your kids are set. For me personally, it's extremely important that I do have some form of stability set up for my child. So when I do leave from this world, she is financially okay. So again, yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment in the comment section. And if you know anyone out there who's trying to get into investing, get into the stock market, please recommend my video. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.